Sorry about that. All right. Yeah.
Somewhere.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Can you guys hear it well? In like.
So I came back and said, I'll guess. October.
Okay, we're gonna enter the yes, so you have to know. Yeah, right. Hi, my name is Blake Group. I'm the program director for the Hubbell Environmental Law Initiative. And I'm going to give a little bit of an intro and about to our program, and then we'll have our students come up and share their experiences. So just pass on. Okay, great. I, like the initiative, both started here in 2022. The Hubbell Environmental Law Initiative is a gift fund from two of our alums. We went out to the world as successful careers, and then wanted to see the College of Law, Iowa College of Law's environmental program expand. So with that, we have a mission, and our mission is to help the College of Law generate opportunities to deepen and broaden our engagement with environmental issues in Iowa and beyond. And the in Iowa portion is our number one focus, because it is in the minds of our donors that be our focus. And so in our program, we are creating an active forum for interdisciplinary engagement on important environmental issues, supporting law students and the curriculum itself, and then strengthening the environmental bar here the same. So we try to achieve all of these missions through different pillars, like most academic programs. They have very similar pillars. So obviously academic opportunities, which are our enrollment focus, as well as professional development, outreach and engagement, and partnerships. And so one of the programs in the pillar of professional development is running our summer grant program. And so our summer grant program supports students who want to do public interest environmental law. So we are supporting students that are securing their own internships at different organizations. So by that we mean they are subject to the normal competitive process that applicants go through for summer internships. So it's up to the organization to review the applications, do the interviews, and do the selection. The only part that we have any space in is to pay students to do the work that is generally unpaid for those organizations. Excuse me, it's hard to navigate here again. I want to just use like a money or something. We're going to do it. You were tweet of the income. Yeah, it's been done. Sure. There she is. All right, can you hear me better there? Okay. So for these internships, they're full-time internships that usually means 8 to 12 weeks, 32 hours a week, whatever is full-time for the organization the students are working for. And then again, it's up to the organization if that's in person, if that's a hybrid or a fully remote position, support all of those options. So when we first started in 2022, we didn't have much of a program in place. We didn't have anything in place at that point. So that process was essentially faculty knew a couple students that already had positions offered to them that were unpaid. So that's how we were able to support those students. In 2023, we expanded the application process, but we only got 4 applications that were qualifying for the grant. The grants were being offered. And I personally had known that there were more students that were interested in doing these summer opportunities. And so I was a little flustered with why we weren't able to offer more stipends. And it turned out it was because we expected students to know 2 things that I think were outside of their own possibility. Number one was doing the absolutely insane bonkers timeline of hiring a summer position, which takes place so far down what a normal student thing. The application process. And then also, we expected students to know the landscape of public interest environmental law in the Midwest. Also, not something that a lot of students have the knowledge of whether you come in. So then from 23 to 24, I did my mission to connect with organizations that have these positions and then also with students so that they could get more placements. And so by 2024, we did have 12 students that we placed. And again, the mission of our initiative is to fund students that are staying in the state or at least the Midwest. And so we did that in 24 last summer with 92% of the students that we have working here in the Midwest, and a bunch of wonderful organizations from Iowa to Illinois to Wisconsin. And so the students you're going to hear from today are from our summer 2025 class. This past summer we had 15 qualified students that got summer grants to work in these positions, and we placed 86% of them in the Midwest, at least with organizations in the Midwest. I think 100% of our students were actually physically in the Midwest for the summer itself. But 86% of them were local organizations here in the Midwest. So we are going to continue to grow our summer program. And I do also want to say that this summer grant program supports public interest students doing this work, but our initiative supports students doing any of their career paths or environmental law. It's just these are the students that we can actually get funding to. So with that, I will let the students take it away with their sharing their experiences. Right in here. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm James. You can call me Jimmy if you want. So this summer I worked at Polk County Public Works in their air quality division. So Polk County is actually only one of 2 different counties that have a local program for air quality. It's them in Lynn County. What that means that they're delegated responsibility from the Iowa DNR to do air quality like permitting and air quality compliance. And then every other county, all the 97 other ones, that's just up to the DNR and every county, so won't do much in a space like permitting compliance, but Polk County does. So just some of my give you like a sense of the work I did. By the way, I was in Des Moines, I was living in Des Moines in personal time, but I worked about a lot of kind of different permitting forms. So Polk County had just changed their code a few months before I got there, because the state legislature passed a law, I think in 2024, that essentially said that local programs could no longer have regulations that were more stringent than the DNR, that had to be in line with the DNR. And so with that, Polk County rewrite the whole code. That was before I got there, but because of that, they kind of changed their permitting, changed their reporting forms, also like their form letters that had to change like their language to their code. So I rewrote a lot of those, so I had kind of like a basic knowledge to start with. And then another thing that Polk County was doing, also taking their permitting from like kind of just a paper system to an all online system. So it kind of works on transferring all those permits to that new online system, making sure it all looks good and had the correct information in there. Two other things I did is I made like a kind of standard operating procedure for compliance actions. So whenever I think anyone in Polk County, was being bad, we had to, oh, hey, don't do that. Oftentimes there's like a procedure in our code that says kind of what Polk County should do, but I wasn't always really clear within Polk County like what the procedure actually was. So basically, I kind of summarized it in like a one thing I made was a document. The other thing I made was a really big flow chart that I thought would be simple and got really complicated really quickly, because environmental law is really complicated really quickly. Yeah, and then kind of I'd say my favorite thing, 2 of my favorite things I did, kind of skipping to the last one, the shadow of some compliance visits. Favorite one was a stack test. Like a stack test, like a big flu, coming out of a place making stuff. I went to one at ADM in Des Moines. So I was really glad I didn't get to go up and like test the stack, because that's what professionals do, but I got to stay down on the ground. I kind of basically stick a probe like into the stack, and they see how much matter is coming out, making sure that it's not too much. Not in school, well, it's kind of interesting because the entity that we were testing had like failed their last one, and so we just kind of like sent it. I don't know if they're gonna pass or not, but you don't know immediately. Got sent to a lab, but they did pass apparently. So good job, ADM. And then my favorite thing I did, these are some of the things I made. On the right is a flyer I made to give the people being bad and emitting so much fugitive dust. So the compliance officer could print that out and give it to them and explain why fugitive dust is bad, and also like, yeah, why it's bad, and I don't know what else I said. I think I also explained that kind of the amount of fugitive dust that breaks the rules, because the rules are in clip. Anyways, not everything I did, I made a map essentially, so I had a tiny background in GIS. So I was able to make a map that essentially, I was trying to summarize the burn restrictions, both in the county, so the county has different burn restrictions depending on where you're at, like in the county code, so like if you're in Des Moines, Windsor, Mason, a few other kind of towns that don't really like burning, they're a lot more stringent on what you can burn than kind of unincorporated parts of Polk County and other cities. Then also cities are allowed to have their own burning rules as well, they don't have to be aligned, so Polk County has it, so. Trying to make a map to summarize a few different types of burning, like landscape waste and burning maintenance, to essentially kind of tell people, you're in this city, you can burn this, and kind of reminding people, like both the city and the county have rules, and then they might not always be the same, you just follow both of them. So that was everything, I was, a bunch of fire marshals and make sure that I was understanding the rules correctly, and they said I wasn't, reading the rules, that's fun, that's fun. So. That's what I do with some.
Well, hi, I'm Sean Hosendagger, and last summer worked for the Iowa Environmental Council. Doing a lot of work under Mike, I'm sure most of you all met or at least heard him speak today. He's a great mentor, did a lot of work. So, while the Iowa Environmental Council does pretty much every smattering of environmental law in connection with Iowa, this summer was really the issue for water quality in Des Moines, so that ended up with a lot of work we did. And so part of that was impact litigation research, so we're trying to see what sort of things we could get into the courts to push some positive change in the state. But also we did a lot of outreach for our community. We were making materials for state and local individuals, and also the donors to the IEC to understand what the issues were and sort of why utility companies were panicking for the nitrates. Some of the other work that we did involved doing utility commission hearings, so we were trying to figure out some of the intricacies in the transmission lines as well as solar panels, getting held up by some of the changes in the federal legislation. And then, yeah, we also made some public comments with the air quality department at Polk County, as well as the rest of Iowa. So, the other great part about working at the IEC is that the team is not just full of lawyers, so they have a lot of experts in both science and sort of environmental sciences in the field. So I got to work with a lot of people on making content for solar siting, as well as different sort of renewable energies in Iowa. And so those are the people who are making some of those educated decisions. And that was a really great experience.
Well, hello everyone. I apologize if I look at my notes throughout this, just make sure to keep it within the time. But it was a very fun summer, so lots I want to cover. My name is Kasim Karimi. I'm a third-year student at the College of Law. Last summer I worked at the Office of Environmental Compliance at the University of Iowa. So for today, I'd like to go over first to give some background on the office and what they do. Next, I'll talk briefly about the utilities on our campus and how they function. And finally, I'll go over some of the projects I worked on over the summer for the office. First, some background on the office. It's located within facilities management at the university, and they're responsible for ensuring that all local, state, and federal environmental laws are met during the design, construction, and operation of UI facilities. So, in terms of design and construction, there are always projects happening on the university's campus. So many, in fact, that the university has to obtain construction permits from Iowa DNR every time they plan to pursue a new project, primarily because we're located in a floodplain. So, for example, there are stormwater pollution prevention plans that are required by law to make sure that our construction sites are being good stewards of runoff. Since we have stormwater drains all throughout the campus and they all end up into the Iowa River. That's just one example of some of the construction permitting that the university faces. But the bulk of the majority of the office, I believe, focus on the operation of our utilities. So I broke it down into 3 segments: water, air, and miscellaneous. In terms of water, we're focused on Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, specifically in regards to NPDES permits, and also permits associated with the UI water plant. Make sure that this university is providing safe drinking water for the campus. In terms of air, we're mainly talking about, of course, Clean Air Act, which encompasses a Title V permit for the entire campus, including both major and minor sources, greenhouse gas reporting to EPA, and even asbestos monitoring. And then the miscellaneous, I consider the jack of all trades. This includes spill prevention plans, which I didn't know was a thing that EPA had. We have generators and elevators on the campus, and we have these certain plans to make sure that oil spills don't end up into waters of the United States. Miscellaneous also includes compliance with the Endangered Species Act, when certain planned projects may have the potential to impact threatened or endangered species. And miscellaneous also includes regulatory compliance with underground storage tanks, which was lots of fun to learn about that. And if you want to learn more, you can feel free to check out the office's website online. They do a great rundown of all the work they do, which is really important. Now I can talk briefly about the utilities. This was my favorite part of the summer experience, because I got to do lots of tours and wear hard hats and vests. So in the upper left-hand corner, you can see a picture of the UI power plant and a glimpse of the water plant. The power plant is a cogeneration plant, so it means it's a combination of heat and power. It provides both electricity and steam for the university. So kind of imagine like a Bunsen burner on your stovetop. It kind of boils water, creates steam, goes through an electric turbine, turns that, generates some amount of electricity for the campus, and then the rest of the steam goes throughout the campus for labs and heating, cooling, and all sorts of good stuff. So it's a very important part of campus. The water plant, of course, provides drinking water. There's a photo of one of the treatment processes in the upper right-hand corner. They're always doing tours, so if you ever want to check out the water plant and learn what they do, they'd be happy to have you. And then what else? Oh, bottom right-hand corner, the chilled water plants. Those guys are really important for our AC on the campus. So in total, we have main power plant, Oakdale power plant, chilled water plants, and the UI water plant. And I'm sure there's other utilities that I haven't mentioned, but those are the ones that is our main focus at the office. Now, my projects. I swear that's not my photo. It's just a Google search. Some of the projects I worked on was related to permitting. So I worked on one project related to renewal. We have lots of permits on the campus, so every few years we have to fill out proposed renewal to Iowa DNR, and then they give us comments whether they approve or disapprove. So I was focused on summarizing those changes for the office to be communicated to the water plant, which those guys at the water plant, they know they're the experts on everything permitting, Iowa DNR, and they're all aware of all that. Second project I worked on was an executive order that was signed by Governor Reynolds, and looking at in terms of how that executive order was going to impact administrative rules and regulations, specifically in regards to wastewater. Worked on another project related to it's kind of an Iowa Supreme Court CERCLA type of case in order to assess whether we should purchase certain real estate at the university. I worked on a new EPA Consumer Confidence Report rule that's going to go into effect in 2027. I'm sure some of us get those emails in our inbox every year about the water plant and how they're compliant. So this new rule is just going to add more disclosures onto that document that you guys receive every year. Worked on a project related to greenhouse reporting for the EPA of the entire campus, updating all our buildings, major and minor sources that need to be reported. And finally, I worked on a kind of a quirky project, the American Water Infrastructure Act, which was passed in 2018 unanimously by the U.S. Senate and House and passed by President Trump regarding. And I did a specific research on emergency planning and how that was going to shape the water plant and its compliance. So that's a little bit about some of the work I did, and thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Megan LeBlanc. This summer I worked at Clean Wisconsin in Madison. Clean Wisconsin is a state level nonprofit that does environmental research, policy advocacy, and legal advocacy. Some of the legal advocacy is impact litigation. Other types of advocacy were was before like the Public Service Commission in Wisconsin, and just generally supporting the policy advocates with legal research back in. I spent the vast majority of my summer helping the attorneys prepare for a contested case hearing for their legal challenge to construction of 45 new miles of pipeline in northern Wisconsin. Enbridge Oil Company, which is a big Canadian oil company, had an existing pipeline that goes through part of northern Wisconsin, and their easement expired over a reservation, and the tribe successfully sued them in trespass. And so Enbridge needed to reroute the pipeline. And the reroute was going to be 45 new miles of pipeline through some really pristine wetlands. These are just some pictures of the areas that we were working to keep the pipeline out of. It was a really big undertaking, like the legal challenge that they did. So they were working with attorneys from Midwest environmental advocates also, and Earth Justice, who were representing the tribe. So it was cool working with those organizations as well. See what else. So most of the time I was doing document review of the 450-page environmental impact statement and the permit file with all of the construction plans for the different sites along the pipeline and all the versions of construction plans as it was going through the permit process to see if like where they were still maybe lacking and meeting the permitting standards from the Department of Natural Resources. So a lot of factual question research into specifics about pipeline construction, which is something I had no background experience in. But it was really inspiring work, and I'm glad I was able to help with that case. Let's see. Oh, and also I was preparing for like cross-examination plans for all of the expert witnesses in the case. Enbridge was really kind of bury the other side and work with lots of experts and lots of discovery requests. So I was busy. And let's see. Oh, outside, this isn't related to the legal work I did for the project, but I wanted to share it. I also spent a lot of time this summer folding origami fish. This is a project that was like a multi-organizational collaboration that was just to bring awareness to the pipeline. And fish were sent in from all 50 states, and then they were compiled into this huge art exhibit at an urban ecology center in Milwaukee. And the total number of fish broke the world record for origami fish in a single exhibition at 86,262. So that was fun. Let's see. Oh, and those are just some pictures of the attorneys I worked with looking super fierce and cool at the contested case hearing back late in September after I had left, but the hearing went on for 5 weeks. So I'm sure they're exhausted in those pictures, but I just think they're really cool pictures of them. And yeah, that was what I did this summer. Hello everyone, my name is Kara. I'm a two-log here, and I spent my summer at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, which sounds pretty similar to Megan's organization. They do a lot of advocacy and policy work in Minnesota. So I work on several projects, but I will just touch on 3 of them to give an overview of what my summer was like. And so the project that I spent the most time on was researching federal and state wetland protections to contribute to the rulemaking for the Wetland Conservation Act. So for context, after SACA versus the EPA reduced federal wetland protections, the Minnesota legislature amended its Wetland Conservation Act, which they call, well, the environmental advocates call WACA. There's a lot of fun acronyms in environmental work to learn. And so they amended WACA to increase state protections to compensate for where traffic fell short. And so the agency responsible for promulgating those regulations, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, or Bowser, for those who didn't know, they made the regulations, and so they had the rulemaking period. So we for submitting a comment, I dug very deep into the nitty-gritty of the regulations that are very technical and confusing. But my suggestions will contribute to the official comment they'll submit later this year. So that's cool to contribute to that. Another interesting thing I had to contribute to was researching environmental review case law. To contribute some impact litigation about data centers in Minnesota. And so the Minnesota Environmental Protection Act, it requires an environmental impact statement. But there's another form of environmental review that isn't used as often as in Minnesota. I'm not sure if other states have this, but it's called alternative urban area-wide review. So it's meant to be accelerated, an accelerated form of review, but still as thorough as an EIS. And so there has been a slew of these AUARs for industrial developments, where they haven't said, what kind of project it will be. But in a lot of these cases, they have been for data centers, and so I did some background research, and then later in the summer in August, MCA actually filed suit against two of these cities. One of them is North Mankato, which is a small town, but their AOR is pictured here. And I saw that just a few days ago, the property developer for this project pulled out. So I think it's safe to say that the lawsuit probably in some way contributed to the change in that project. And so lastly, I will just touch on the environmental justice focus that MCA also has. So they try to be a real ally to community groups who are communities who are most impacted by environmental harm. And so in the county where Minneapolis is, almost half of the trash produced there is burned at the trash incinerator on the north side of downtown. It's a significant contributor to pollution in an already very polluted neighborhood that has some of the highest rates of asthma in states. And these community groups have been fighting to shut down this incinerator for over 15 years. And so I had the opportunity to go with some other MCA staff to a county commissioner hearing where community members were testifying about the negative effects to their health that this incinerator has had over the last couple decades. And so that was a really cool opportunity to see how the legal research that I've been doing all summer did contribute to real people and places in the community. So yeah, it's a good.
Hi there. Hi everyone. My name is Ronnie Miller. I'm a 3L from Crete, Nebraska here at Iowa Law. And this summer I had the honor of working for Sierra Club's national office based out of Oakland, California. And with the generous support from HELI, I was able to go in person for 2 weeks to meet and work with my team. So that's me with my co-interns from Berkeley and NYU, and then my supervisor. And what was really special about this experience as a Nebraska girl here in Iowa is I was repeatedly told that they had never met someone from Nebraska or Iowa, and that they had never hired someone from Iowa at Sierra Club's national office. So I felt like I was adding a little bit to that geography diversity there. To talk a little bit about what I got to do for the Sierra Club, is a lot of writing, a lot of research, but specifically on that writing piece, I got to help author things that were actually filed. So on my birthday this summer, I learned how to write a FOIA administrative appeal, and then we filed it on the same day, which is always really exciting to just learn by doing it. And so that was an attempt to get some Doge records about cuts to the Department of Energy that they, of course, denied when the first FOIA request was filed, but eventually got them. And you can see them now, which is fun to see, like, something I got to be a part of was actually released and it's on the Sierra Club's website. So that's what part of my work was. But most of my work was around data centers that Kara just mentioned and the growth of them around AI. If you have heard of the environmental impacts of data centers around AI, will you just raise your hand? Okay, so I'm like speaking to the right audience because when I try to explain these things to other classmates or my family, like we gotta reel it way back to explain like what data centers are, what they're doing. And so there are a lot of implications for data centers when it comes to water, like 500,000 gallons of water are consumed per day by the average data center. But most of my work was on the energy side and their electricity consumption before public utility commissions. So this is an example of, up in the top corner is a big integrated resource planning, like hearing, contested hearing that happened in Georgia that I worked on a lot of the filings and prep for expert witnesses on. And so that was specifically for meta data centers being built outside of Atlanta. But these data centers are being built all over. A Google one is currently under construction in Cedar Rapids on the QTS, one also in the same sort of area by Cedar Rapids. So the projections for energy consumption by data center buildouts is that by 2030, they could consume 15% of all US electricity. So that comes with a high cost to ratepayers, but also to our existing energy infrastructure in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and just being able to produce for these demands. And all of the fighting against the build out of data centers and the regulation of them is happening at the local level. And that's where Sierra Club nationally and the local organizations are stepping in. So to give some like good news for fighting data centers is $18 billion for data center investment has been blocked in the year of 2025 by local organizing, and another $46 billion has been delayed. So the fight is really happening in that local organizing against data centers and pushing costs onto consumers to build a new natural gas plant or to fund the electricity bills for these systems. So I learned a lot about what public utility commissions are and how to advocate in front of them, and learned a lot of really great writing skills for those sort of like quasi-administrative trial-like hearings. That was really interesting. And I think a part of the conversation about artificial intelligence that gets really lost in I think the greater sort of national dialogue that we're having about it. So a very interesting summer and has spurred some work that I'm continuing to do here with HELI and some of my coursework. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon. I'm a student currently, and I spent my summer doing remote legal and policy research for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. They're located in St. Louis, Missouri, where I was able to do my orientation the rest of the time I was here in Iowa City. NCE is a citizens environmental organization, which means they rely very heavily on members of the community, both in St. Louis and throughout the rest of Missouri. They only have, I believe, 5 full-time staff members, only one of whom holds a JD, who is my supervisor. this summer, which means like one of the principal aspects of my work was working with what NCE calls concerned citizens, which are the members of the communities who are experiencing environmental problems and bringing them to NCE. And this was a really interesting experience, and it wasn't an aspect of the internship that I was like super expecting, because it was almost tangential to like client work, where it was people calling me and being like, I have this problem, what are you guys gonna do about it? And I was like, well, we're not a law firm and you're not a client, but I'm doing a lot of research on Westlaw right now. And the two principal concerns that I dealt with were an issue down in Southwest Missouri with a lot of unpermitted gravel mining operations. And a lack of Missouri's DNR involvement in looking at what potential causes could be brought by citizens or on behalf of them by NCE. This photo down here at the bottom is an example of like what a gravel mining operation could look like. In about once a week, I would get like a bunch of photos like this. That to me just looked like a stream of someone be like, isn't this awful? And I would be like, yes, it is. And then I would have to do a lot of like looking on Google Maps and Google Images to like understand why this is different from a stream and why that is a concerning problem. So you know, it was a lot of like learning both about the law governing these issues and then learning about what these actual issues look like for the people living them and what their experiences are, which I found to be very rewarding. And the other problem that I did most of my research on was an issue with trichloroethylene contamination in a town in the Ozarks. Trichloroethylene is a chemical that I had not heard of before this project, but there's like a very long history throughout the states of various industrial production sites using it and just poisoning the water around towns. And one such case is in Missouri, and looking at the like decades of usage and dumping of this chemical, and also what potential courses of action would be available at the state and the federal level, which involved a lot of learning laws and jurisdictional things that I was not previously aware of. But I had a great experience. I met some cool people, and I learned just so much that I didn't at the beginning of the summer, and that was made possible with my HELI grant to work with NC.
All right, I'm gonna say thank you to the students for sharing their experiences with us. This was less than half the students that were involved in the program and half the organization. So we are on the lookout for more organizations and students. So if anybody in this room or in Des Moines, or if somebody in your network, if you use the legal aid program over the summer, just get in touch with me.
Also, Des Moines crew says great job, students.
This is actually Christine.